Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the lecture for Chapter 6. And we left off last lecture and talking about assimilation and accommodation. And assimilation and accommodation are examples of organization. Piaget believed that children cognitively organize their experiences. And when we talk about organization, what that means is that they have these mental representations of certain behaviors or certain mental ideas or certain cognitive activities. And what they do is place them into a higher order system. So that's it. So just like you organize material for this class, for example, talking about the beginning, biology, cognition, socio-emotional processes, all of that would be an example of organization that children are working on as they experience this new world. When we also talk about assimilation and accommodation, we have to talk about equilibration and the stages of development. But before we talk about equilibration, we have to talk about disequilibrium. Disequilibrium. So when we talk about disequilibrium, that is cognitive conflict. When we have, for example, with assimilation, we have this new material, but we have these mental representations, mental schemas that may not fit. It may not fit the mental representations or the new information. They may not fit well together. And so when children mature and they go through these cognitive development stages, they have cognitive conflict in trying to understand the world around them. And so when they are able to reach, go from one stage of thought to the next, that's called equilibration. And what that means is that finally children are able to come to this cognitive understanding of what things are in the world. So equilibration, when we talk about the girl Jocelyn in the last lecture slide, she reached equilibration when she finally figured out that a cat is something different than a dog. So now that's equilibration, but she was going through disequilibrium when she saw this cat but only understood it as a dog. And so equilibration is when children have this inner sense of balance between new information and old information. Okay, so now we are going to really get into how children develop cognitively according to Piaget. So we are going to get into it. Next slide, it talks about the 4 stages of development. And as you can see, there are specific stages, which again makes Piaget's theory of development discontinuous because it has specific theories. And what we are actually going to talk about today in this section is the sensory motor stage. And the sensory motor stage is from birth to 2 years of age. The sensory motor stage also has 6 substages, which we are going to really get into, take a deep dive into. And this cognitive understanding of sensory motor stage is going to help us understand cognitive development for children of this age. So let's get started. And we're going to get started with the simple reflexes. Substage 1 of the sensory motor stage is called simple reflexes. And that takes place from birth to 1 month of age. And so what happens during this time is that we have babies, but they are doing certain actions, but it's mainly because it's a reflex. Not because they're doing it on purpose, but it's mainly a reflex. During this time of the child doing these simple reflexes, this time of doing this simple reflexes allows for the children to really experience and actively experience, have these active experiences, structuring experiences around them in their first month of life. And so let's talk about the rooting reflex, which is something very interesting to me. What the rooting reflex is you can graze the side of the baby's mouth, of the baby's face, or you can graze the corner of the baby's lips. And what does the baby do? The baby will turn its head and open its mouth. This encourages infant feeding. It's a reflex. They don't do this on purpose. Like I said, it's more of a reflex, and it helps the infant find the breast or the bottle for feeding. What are some other reflexes that babies have? What do you think? Another example of a reflex that babies have is the sucking reflex. Anytime you put something in a baby's mouth, they are going to suck. They're going to suck it. So that, again, substage 1, just simple reflexes, but these simple reflexes are still allowing the child to actively structure experiences in their first year of life. Up next is the second sensory motor substage, which are first habits. And this occurs when children are between the ages of 1 and 4 months of age. And they have two types of schemes. The first type of scheme that we're going to discuss is a habit. Remember, schemes are mental representations. And so what this habit is now is that it's based on the reflex. So we talked about reflexes in the last slide, where we talked about the rooting reflex, or we talked about the sucking reflex. But usually reflexes have to have some kind of stimulus that encourages this habit, or encourages this reflex. But now when we have a habit, now the child is able to complete this reflex without the stimulus being there. So a stimulus is anything that arouses activity or energy in someone or something. So for example, when children usually see a bottle, they usually will start to suck. But now with this habit, children will suck without the bottle being around. And the bottle in this example is the stimulus. So now children begin to have these habits. And the baby is still really focused on its own body at this time. They're not really influenced by environmental factors, still really influenced by their own body. So obviously sucking would be, they're focused on their own body with sucking because they know that they're going to be able to get something to eat. Let's go to the next substage. Or actually, this is the same substage, the second sensory motor substage, but we're talking about primary circular reactions now. Circular reaction is just a repetitive action. Repetitive action. And a primary circular reaction is what the child is trying to do during this primary circular reaction is that they are trying to repeat an event that originally happened by chance. So for example, a baby may have made a mistake and somehow got its thumb stuck in its mouth. Not stuck, but they made a mistake and put their thumb in their mouth. And now they figured out they like putting their thumb in their mouth. So now what they're going to try to do is try to repeat this event. They're going to try to see if they can get their thumb in their mouth more times to allow them to suck on their thumb. But originally, putting their thumb in their mouth occurred by chance. So now they're just continuously trying to do it again. Again, during this stage, The infant's body is the center of the infant's attention. The third sensory motor substage, we talk about secondary circular reactions. So in the second sensory motor substage, we talked about primary circular reactions, things that happen by chance or things that happened as a result of a reflex when the stimulus isn't there. But now we're talking about secondary circular reactions. This occurs between 4 and 8 months of age. This is a time where infants really start to focus on the environment. So for example, as you can see, this baby has a rattle in its hand. And infants can imitate simple actions. So they may be able to shake a rattle. They may be able to suck on a rattle. They do it not because they have any goals of trying to really understand the environment. They do it because they're fascinated with the rattle or with the object. They don't do it to get the attention of their caregivers. Like I said, it's not intentional. It's not goal directed. It is only for their own pleasure. Fourth sensory motor substage, we are talking about how the secondary circular reactions are now beginning to be coordinated. This occurs between 8 and 12 months of age. Not only does the infant have to coordinate what they see, but the infant has to coordinate vision with touch. What they feel and what they see are things that the infant has to coordinate. During this fourth sensory motor stage, children begin to have actions that are more outwardly directed. So they're not mainly focused on themselves anymore. They're more focused on the environment and what they can do to change the environment around them. An important part of this fourth sensory motor substage is intentionality. For the past substages that we talked about, many of those things that children would do to construct their cognitive, to construct the environment around them and experience cognitive development were done with no intention. No, it was not done on purpose. But now, when we get into this coordination of secondary circular reactions, we're seeing that children are doing these things in their environment intentionally. Fifth sensory motor substage is the tertiary circular reactions, novelty, and curiosity. During this stage is when we have children that are beginning to be curious. And this develops between 12 and 18 months of age. This is where, again, the child purposely explores new possibilities. For example, we have a child here who was playing with blocks. As you can tell from this picture, the blocks were originally built on top of each other, but the child understands that they are trying now to explore what happens if they push the blocks down. And according to this baby, pushing blocks down is very cool. They really enjoy it. So what they're doing, they're building things and they're doing things, for example, like building, and they're pushing blocks down, for example, to explore the results. So they're, again, purposely doing things, but still have to have that, that hand and that eye coordination. During this stage, Piaget believed that this is where human curiosity and interest in novelty is new. Again, novelty is new. And that is when he believed that this is when this started to occur. The last substage are mental representations. It's just when children are able to understand symbols. So they may understand that a symbol is a heart. A heart is a symbol for love. And this is a symbol for stop. So that substage 6, they start to understand what symbols represent. Okay, I'll see you all on